Welcome once again to the Tin Dog Podcast. This week's podcast is a double, reviewing Mr. Moffat's library-based story. Sadly, this is a re-record, as there were some issues with the MP3 encoding. So sorry this is a bit late, but I have actually recorded this show once already, and now I have to do it all again from the original notes. If it'll help you, imagine Cosgrove Hall sitting there, digitally remastering it from audio recordings and snippets of notes that they found lying around. No, it doesn't help me either. So let's begin with the first half of this podcast recording with the dedication of this week's show to Graham Brown of Glasgow. Thanks for keeping the Tin Dog Podcast running. I'd also like to thank everyone who's sent me positive emails lately. It really means a lot. And of course the majority were asking where this particular Tin Dog Podcast was. Well, of course now you know the answer. And that also explains how you got the slightly rushed podcast last week, bringing you up to date with all of the DVD releases. Hope that one was okay. Anyway, enough chat. Let's discuss Part 1, Silence in the Library. Of course, Silence opened with one of the greatest openings of any Doctor Who I've seen in, ever. It started like this.
Close your eyes and tell me what you see.
The library.
Open your eyes again. Where are you now?
My living room, Dr. Moon.
When you close your eyes.
I go to the library.
And this was more than enough to get most Doctor Who fans going. It doesn't really come as much of a surprise that the week before this story aired was the week that we found out all about the Grand Moff, replacing RTD. And indeed, as a small note to one side, it's nice to be able to announce that Russell T Davies, or indeed as his real name is, Russell Davies, has just been given an OBE. Or at least he'll be in the next Queen's Honours list, which of course is the same award that Verity Lambert had. Well done, Russell. Thanks. Getting back to the story at hand, the importance of multiple storylines of course is obvious to us all, and indeed Mr. Moffat likes to fill his two-part stories with enough ultimately interconnected storylines to keep the fans guessing for that whole intervening week. So we're presented with our little girl, the one who closes her eyes and is in the library. We're then presented with the same scene, but from a different point of view, when we discover the little girl's seeing through the eyes of a security camera, a lovely piece of design in dark wood. And then after that, the story really picks up a gear when we meet River Song. She becomes our new focus for the whole of fandom. I'm sure as Moffat was typing away, a little smile would have crossed his lips as he thought about all of the internet forums practically exploding as they chatted about who exactly River Song is. Of course, at this point, we hadn't seen episode 2, so we're all sitting there on the edge of our seats, thinking things like, she called him Sweetie and used an X. Of course, she turns up and she's a bit Benny-tastic, and for those of you who don't know, Paul Cannell created a character called Bernice Summerfield, who was an archaeologist who travelled with the Doctor only in the novels, and whether you count those as canon or not, really your call. Bernice also exists on audio discs, played I believe by Lisa Bowman. I've only heard a few of them and I'd like to hear more. But enough about Big Finish, and back to this. River Song became the new focus for fandom. She had that lovely little blue book, the one with the TARDIS cover on, the one that I'm sure could either be a copy of the Paul Cannell Discontinuity Guide in a lovely binding, or even that incredibly in-depth tome, A History, something I would definitely recommend to any Doctor Who fan, that gives you the complete background of the Doctor's life. You see, up to this point the Doctor is 900 years old. We always think of him as old. Even the Doctor himself says,
I'm thick! Look at me, I'm old and thick! Head's too full of stuff, I need a bigger head!
whereas here River says,
look at you. You're young.
I'm really not, you know.
and it kind of gives us a whole new outlook. But of course, does this mean that the Doctor isn't limited to 12 lives? For some fans of New Who, the idea of the Doctor being limited to 12 lives may be a bit of a surprise, but it was mentioned some time ago, in the Fourth Doctor's Time First, that the Time Lords only have 12 incarnations, so there would be 13 lives. Now apparently, the 13th life may or may not be already taken. In the interests of not spoiling certain DVD releases this summer, I won't go any further down that road. But this 12-life rule seemed fine back in the 70s, even in the 80s. There was enough long-lived doctors to last us almost forever. But at the moment we're up to Doctor 10. Soon, or perhaps not too soon, we'll be into Doctor 11, then 12, and that'll be the end of the show. Now obviously it's fiction, so you could do whatever you wanted. Personally, I would like to believe that when the 10th Doctor became human, using the Chameleon Arch, and then became a Time Lord again, just like the Master, he was given a full new set of lives. Technology left over from the Time War in order to let the Time Lords fight on. It's small, it's interesting, it's completely made up by fandom, but it will allow the series to go on without too much tinkering with continuity. You see, we're all caught up in continuity. There's a fantastic story happening on the screen in front of us, and we're sitting here saying, well, is she a companion? Is she perhaps, well, something I like to believe, she's like Sarah Jane from the future. She's Sarah Jane in the sense that she's a companion that's seen the Doctor in a few generations, a few different faces, a few different forms, which is why she tries to figure out which Doctor she's currently dealing with. She's like Sarah Jane in the fact that she's really, really liked by the Doctor. Now she ends up, at this point we know that she has, a sonic screwdriver that bears more than a passing resemblance to the Doctor's, although in my sad little fan way I would have preferred her to have one of the classic sonic screwdriver designs. You know, the aluminium one with the pointy end, but that would have probably messed with continuity even more. And boy, how well designed was that sonic screwdriver. A little steampunk touch here and there, nicely aged, nicely souped up. I loved the brass handle section, but like I said, we're just being sucked in by the details. We're missing huge sections of the plot, which brings us to the Vashta Nerada. Now, as monsters go, they fit in with Uncle Moffat's idea of monsters particularly well. Something that's identifiable by children, that's part of their lives, that could give them nightmares. A perfectly good way of behaving as a writer. So here we have carnivorous shadows, dust mites from hell, the Vashta Nerada. Were fantastic ideas. As they were described in this episode, they were piranha. You just can't reason with piranha, and that for me was what made them great. In Star Trek, all of the races and creeds are merely that, different ways of looking at ourselves. You visit another planet in Star Trek, and they're not monsters. They may have different motivations to us, or to the humans in the show, but strictly speaking, they are just races that can be dealt with on some level. Here we have a creature of instinct, something that you only have to survive. Well, you just run. Moffat's been using tiny life forms in other episodes. The Empty Child used nanobots, and of course this episode does have many other similarities with those other stories. His use of repetition in The Empty Child and indeed in Blink are legendary. You can compare if you like.
Mommy. Mommy. Mommy.
What's happening?
I don't know.
Mommy.
It's me, Nancy.
With the end of this episode, when we hear two pieces of repetition.
Donna Noble has been saved.
Turn down the lights.
Donna Noble has left the library. Donna Noble has been saved.
Hey, who turned down the lights?
Donna Noble has left the library. Donna Noble has been
Hey,
saved.
who turned down the lights?
Again, wonderfully executed. And as the episode ended, we were left with several questions. Questions we considered to ourselves nicely over the week. The first, of course, was who really is River Song? You've heard my theories on that already. The second was, where does reality actually lie? And who is the little girl? Now, of course, most of us thought that the little girl was Cal because she was the security system, because she saw through the security system, but we didn't know who Dr. Moon was. We didn't know about the world the little girl lived in. Now, even if it was like The Matrix, that's The Matrix in the film. That's fine, because deep down, The Matrix, as a virtual reality thing, comes from Doctor Who. Well, actually, doesn't really come from Doctor Who in that sense. It comes from a much earlier set of sources that permeate sci-fi culture for almost 100 years. We've been asking ourselves questions like what really is real, and how do we know it's real, for as long as we've been alive, for as long as mankind's been sentient. So implying that somebody's been ripping someone off as an idea just means you don't understand the idea completely yourself. Of course we had some clues to this. The planet was the biggest hard drive ever. The idea that all of these people had gone missing, and yet they'd been saved, was something we could all deal with. And we were still expecting Moffat to pull something else out of the hat, because this was one of the nicest and best Doctor Who stories we'd had in what's been a fantastic season so far. We had heard in other Doctor Who stories that the human race had spent millennia as downloads, so storing them as data really isn't a problem. When Donna eventually vanishes, we assume she's been saved, just like everyone else. Oh, I have a small question about this, but perhaps that'll wait for my review of episode 2. To bring me up to the episode 2 review, here's a short word from another podcast that you might enjoy.
Coming soon to Broken Sea Audio Productions. Doctor Who, starring Mark Kalita as the Doctor.
Curiouser and curiouser.
You know me, Doctor? Good. A doomed man should know his assassins.
I am notoriously hard to kill.
Times Champion has entered a new dimension of adventure.
But that's impossible. I was there when Zack recorded the log. We all were, including the Doctor.
No doctors are mentioned in the log.
How can that be?
The visions, they're back. So much fear, so much death.
He is called the Doctor. You are to be the vehicle of his salvation. 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 Salvation.
Doctor Who, coming to Broken Sea Audio Productions, January 2008. BrokenSea.com.
And so, episode 2 comes round a week later. We're still there, sitting quietly, waiting to hear if that lovely little blue book would ever be released as a nice filofax, possibly as a free gift with that children's Doctor Who magazine that always seems to be in the supermarket whenever you go. One thing we are very aware of is that this episode really isn't Love and Monsters. Many theories had been put forward by this point as to who exactly River Song was, and that was fine. I was still sticking with my theory. Small questions, like where did all the books actually come from, and more importantly what were they printed on, because I just assumed that they were going to be extremely high quality reproductions, perhaps printed on something like a buckyball, so that they wouldn't age or damage or anything like that, thus allowing perfect storage, was swiftly thrown out of the window. A few things worthy of note in this story, of course, is Donna's Matrix-style life. Let's compare this.
Right now, we're inside a computer program.
Is it really so hard to believe? Your clothes are different, the plugs in your arms and head are gone. Your hair has changed. Your appearance now is what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix.
With this,
I suggested we meet here because a playground's the easiest place to see it. To see the lie.
What lie?
The children. Look at the children.
Why'd you wear that veil? If I had a face like yours, I wouldn't hide it.
You remember my face then? The memories are all still there. The library, the Doctor, me. You've just been programmed not to look.
Sorry, but you're dead.
In a way, we're all dead here, Donna. We are the dead of the library.
Well, what about the children? The children aren't dead. My children aren't dead.
Your children were never alive.
Don't you say that.
and I must admit, I think Doctor Who did it slightly better. Now, of course, I'm just a little bit biased, but that's not a problem, is it? You won't hold that against me. Something that I do hold against this episode, however, is something Donna said to the person who becomes her husband. She said,
Ooh, you've got a bit of a stammer there. Bless. Oh, skip to a vowel there, easy.
And as I heard that on the screen, I did think to myself, I wonder how many people are going to be picked on Monday because of their stammer, and they'll use Donna's words. Admittedly, she didn't deliver them with even remotely the amount of hate or loathing that some people might be exposed to, but it did make me wonder for a moment. We kind of were presented with the final story that we thought we would have. I didn't, however, expect the small girl to be one of the people with the spoon faces. That came as a surprise to me, not admittedly to everyone else, but that's fine. I enjoyed everyone's performance in this. Alex Kingston was exemplary. In fact, I don't think there was a bad performance in the whole programme. Dr. Moon was lovely and sinister until we saw the moon and somebody said that was Dr. Moon. Is it just me, or is having a character called Sky in the next Doctor Who, and a character called Moon and another character called River a little bit odd. I do, however, have a small question. Something that's occurred to me the other day. Donna gets transmatted or beamed into the large supercomputer at the centre of the planet, and then she gets reconstituted and lives to fight another day. However, isn't there something on Donna's back? Did that also get backed up, saved, and then returned to her in one piece? I'm sure we'll find out within the next 3 weeks. I enjoyed River Song's description of her Doctor, although I must admit I expected her to have had at least 3. It reminded me of Hugh Laurie in the TV series House, the unshaven, the slightly manic, the also slightly posh, but of course with his original English accent. I like the idea of being able to tell the Doctors apart and not apart just by looking them in the eye, and I also like the idea of there being countless more episodes and stories containing the Doctor that would go on for a very, very long time. Although how small the print is in that book is open for debate. Some people in fandom's world look at the stories that Russell T Davies has been responsible for over the last few years and see certain themes reoccurring. To these themes they say there is some sort of agenda, and one of them is to do with the use of gender roles. Men fancying other men, women with other women, and so on. Things that were never really dealt with in the original Doctor Who. For some of these people have seen that Moffat coming in to replace Russell T Davies could be a new beginning to this. Well, I'd like to draw their attention to the BBC 7 downloadable commentary, where Moffat talks about his original script, and in the original script, the person who was Donna's husband is revealed to be a woman. Russell loved this, Stephen loved this, but the rest of the crew thought it was one step a little bit further than we needed to go in the narrative. Not because it was a bad idea, but mainly because it detracted from the idea that Donna's relationship with anyone inside the virtual world was real. I just thought people who worry about agendas and that sort of thing should be aware of this. Of course, another theme of Moffat's stories is that everybody lives. Whether he'll be able to keep this up when he takes control is another thing worth thinking about. I for one hope he doesn't. I'm not exactly after a high body count, but I am after something else, and I know he's more than capable of producing it. Everybody lives? Yeah, but not always. And so we come to the end of this review. A fantastic story, well executed, well acted, with enough backstory to keep all the most cynical of the old school fans happy. I for one loved this. And before I go, I'd like to play another track from the excellent Who Mix site. This is Andy T's version of the Middle 8 medley. Now for those of you who don't know, the Middle 8 is the centre section of the Doctor Who theme tune, which has, like the Doctor Who theme tune itself, evolved with time. This is a medley of all of the available versions, brought together for the first time. It's a lovely little curio. Again, if you'd like to pass on a message to Andy T, feel free to visit the Who Mix site. Just go to your search engine, type in Who Mix, all one word, and it'll take you straight there, and you'll be able to leave comments for Andy T. Thanks for listening. Be seeing you. You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.